Give it up to my homie, Combest.
Earlier this week, the Senate and the President signed into law about a new federal holiday called Juneteenth. Within that, I have seen a lot of people wondering and questioning what exactly is Juneteenth, what are we actually celebrating on this day, and I'm here to give you guys some of the historical information and context behind what is Juneteenth and what exactly happened on June 19th. Then I'm going to give you guys some of my personal opinions about what I think about Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday in the United States of America. So, to start it off, exactly what is Juneteenth? Some people are saying that Juneteenth is the day that we celebrate when the slaves were actually freed. So, when you say that, you think about the Emancipation Proclamation, when that actually wasn't the case. Because the Emancipation Proclamation was actually signed into law on September 22nd, 1862, but it wasn't to take into effect the following January of 1863. Now, where does Juneteenth come in and all of that? Juneteenth is the day, or Jubilee Day some may call it. That is the day on June 19th, 1865, where some of the Union soldiers arrived into Texas and informed the slaves in Texas that they had actually been free back when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. You wonder, how could that happen? How could the slaves go on 2.5 years and not know that they were free? You have to understand, this was actually during the Civil War. And within that, they say the Civil War ended when Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses Grant, and that had happened on April 9th in 1865. But actually, the Civil War went in for another 16 months when then President Andrew Johnson would declare a formal end to the conflict in August of 1866. So, that may have been one of the bigger events on the April 9th, but even after that happened, you still had southern states and border states that still owned slaves. So, within that context, you have to understand that we're going through a civil war, and you had one side of the country that declared slaves free, and they actually had slaves sign up to join in the Navy and the Army to fight in the Civil War, and then you still had another side of the country, you still had border states that still did not agree with that, and they still held on to their slaves. So, even after Robert E. Lee had surrendered, you still had other states like Texas and Florida and Georgia who still had slaves even after that surrender, even after the Emancipation Proclamation. So they still had slaves. So it wasn't until June 19th, 1865 when the Union soldiers arrived to Texas and they informed those slaves that they had been freed about 2.5 years prior when the Emancipation Proclamation took into effect. So that's a bit of historical context on what exactly Juneteenth is to commemorate. Now, that leads me to go from the historical context to my personal feelings on what exactly I feel about Juneteenth. June 19th is a thing that should be remembered and should be highlighted within the United States history of America, within America's history, because that is American history. That should be highlighted. It should be remembered. It probably should be a holiday. This has been a thing that's been celebrated in pockets of the country, some in the South, in Texas, some in upstate New York, some in pockets around all over the country, that you have pockets of communities that actually celebrated Juneteenth since 1866. So you go from 1866 to now 2021, now you make it a holiday, and it's kind of like a why now, not a why now, but like it feels somewhat like a distraction in a sense. We've been asking for some equal rights, some racial equality, voting rights, stopping police brutality. We've been asking for so many things. How did this supersede and get expedited over those things. Yes, it had 200 years to get here, but at the same time, there was other pressing matters that I feel like, how did this get over that? And now this is becoming a federal holiday, so all America has to take off. Well, who's the majority of Americans? White people. So wait a minute, you mean to tell me majority of white people are getting the day off and getting paid to celebrate Black Plight? What? Where's my kufi? I'm turning into Dr. Umar. It feels like a slap in the face because this is not what we asked for. Yes, this is nice. Yes, we'll take it. But at the same time, it just feels like the government kind of just giving us like a, man, y'all bullshit, man. Here, nigga, damn. Just also remind them that, hey, just because we have this doesn't mean we gonna stop asking and demanding all the other shit that we've been saying we've been wanting for hundreds of fucking years. Because, as I said before, this just feels symbolic to kind of quiet down the rumblings and, the displeasements of black people within this country. It's such a symbolic gesture, but that doesn't necessarily heal anything. It doesn't necessarily address anything, because we live in a country where they're fighting against critical race theory being taught in schools. So we have this holiday of Juneteenth about what was going on with the slaves still being slaves for 2 years after they have been declared free, and we can't even teach that in some of the schools because you have governors and state politicians who are creating bills and legislation to stop critical race theory being taught in schools. So we can't even teach what the real definition of this holiday is in some of the schools in the country that we celebrate it in. So it's like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, what is this for? And that's just more reason to point out the hypocrisy and the systematic racism that goes on in this country, because we can't just keep calling it systematic racism, because it kind of takes away accountability in a face that belongs to it. Because when you point out the individuals who happen to take part in the systematic racism, they can blindly just say, I'm not racist. And like I said, as a black person, it feels really nasty. It feels like a slap in the face, because I don't like being this guy, but it's a thing that's being said, so let me just address it. You have them creating legislation for other people. You have them creating legislation and laws for other communities. More recently, they passed an anti-Asian hate crime bill. That was an executive order that was passed. They made that. They did that. After a lot of the backlash that the Asian community got because of the coronavirus, they created the anti-Asian hate crime bill. So that felt like a slap in the face, and I hate being that guy to point it out, because it's like, y'all do for them, but y'all you didn't make a presidential run trying to tell people if you didn't vote for them, you're not Asian. You talked to us, and then you got on that stage and you said the black community looked out for me again. You banged your fist and you said that. You were speaking directly to the black community, and yeah, you talked to other communities too, but you really, when it comes to me personally, and I just feel it in my soul that we get used. We get played so badly in this country, where we ask for things, we demand things, and y'all act like y'all fight for us, and y'all act like y'all on our side, and then y'all get into positions of power, and then yet y'all don't do anything to change the systematic racism and the systematic issues that oppress people like me and the people who look like me in this country. Y'all don't do things to aid us, and then when we see things like the anti-Asian hate crime bill, it feels like a slap in the face. But I know most people probably didn't even read what was in the anti-Asian hate bill, because I actually went and read the shit, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, okay, I could pump the brakes now. Even when I looked into the anti-Asian hate crime bill, and you understand that's actually not creating harsher repercussions for people who commit hate crimes against Asians, it's way more about the data and the research and what goes into defining an actual hate crime. You start to understand, like, oh, wait a minute, y'all ain't even do nothing for the Asians either. Y'all just gave them another symbolic gesture with a really nice name on it that made it look like you did something, but you really didn't do anything. And it's very similar to what I feel like with Juneteenth. It's like, we've been asking for stuff, and yet y'all give us this. This is cool, but like, one of the biggest things it's doing is creating another awkward interaction between me and another white person. That's just a thing. I know I'm gonna see a white person on Juneteenth, and hey, all right. It's like, Well, what am I supposed to do? Like, we having a cookout. Hey, Whitey, you go sit your ass back down. Matter of fact, go grab some coals and you sit on the... Like, no. It feels like an empty compliment. Just like an empty... Like, it's not an empty threat. Just like an empty gesture is what it feels like. Yes, it's the day off. Yes, we get paid, but other people get paid. So, wait, is it really for us and for everybody? Like, what is this? And then you got other countries saying that it's not going to be a paid holiday because they don't got the funding for it, because within their state budget, they only got enough money for 12 days out the year to give niggas money. So we ain't even paying y'all for this. And then the courts are going to be closed. Another holiday that's in the way of people who suffer from the criminal system the most, who get targeted by the criminal system. And then if you want to get into the whole prison is another form of slavery thing, that's a whole other bad that I'm not getting into, because I feel like we throw around the word slavery way too loosely and it's disrespectful to what slavery actually was. But that's not to take away how horrible and horrendous prison is to people, because people feel like, oh, once you're a prisoner you lose all your human rights, your basic human rights. Like, what? No, that's not what prison is. And when you go into the history of prison, it kind of ties back into the Civil War, because the South believed that their economy couldn't survive without slaves. So they needed some way to make slavery okay. So, it's just... I want to take a moment and just say that Juneteenth is a thing, and it should be a thing. It should be a thing. No matter how late we got it, it should be a thing. I almost said thank you, but who am I thanking and what am I thanking them for? So I'm not saying thank you. But at the same time, Juneteenth is a thing. We got it. We didn't really ask for this, but we got it. We was asking for a bunch of other stuff that people out here on the streets fighting for every day. And just because we got this doesn't mean we don't have to stop. Doesn't mean we have to stop fighting. Doesn't mean that the fight is over. Because when we took up this fight, you don't take up a fight because you think you're going to win. You take up a fight because you believe the cause is worth fighting for. In that closing, those are just my thoughts on the situation. I love to hear you guys' thoughts, because like I said, this is very deep. As you guys can tell, I am conflicted. I love to hear what you guys think. We could talk about it in the comments down below. Follow me on social media. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. I'm done.